Let's turn to Europe now, where NATO is celebrating its birthday. Quite an important one too. Thursday marks the 75th anniversary of NATO's foundation. So the foreign ministers have gathered in advance. And their big mission? A long-term plan for Ukraine. NATO is looking to raise $100 billion for Kiev. This money will be spread across 5 years. But why now? It's been more than 2 years since the war started. So why is NATO proposing this now? Listen to what the alliance chief said.
We are now discussing ways to institutionalize more of the support within a NATO framework, to make it more predictable, to make it more robust, because we strongly believe that support to Ukraine should be less dependent on short-term voluntary offers and more dependent on long-term NATO commitments.
Let me repeat that. NATO wants the aid to be predictable. And it's clear why. Joe Biden had promised some $60 billion in aid, but the US Congress has refused to pass it. And then you have Donald Trump. If he wins the White House, all bets are off, because Trump has hinted at cutting off military aid to Ukraine. So what does NATO do? Create a long-term funding plan. Diplomats are calling it Trump-proof. But how will such a plan work? Right now, NATO is not giving lethal aid to Ukraine. As an alliance, it is only giving non-lethal aid. All the military stuff is being given at the bilateral level. Member countries are giving arms to Ukraine, not NATO per se. The plan is to change that. NATO wants to take over the Ramstein Group. It's a coalition created to channel weapons to Ukraine. Currently, the US leads this group, which means a future US president could handicap it. So NATO wants to take over. It wants to lead the lethal weapon supply to Kiev, which again raises two questions. One, where will this money come from? And two, will all NATO members agree to this plan? Now, diplomats say all 32 alliance members will contribute money. How much is not clear yet. NATO already has a formula for sharing its budget. Maybe they will apply the same to this. If so, the US could end up giving $16 billion. And question number two, will all the members agree? Looks tough at the moment. The likes of Hungary are not keen on this move. They say if NATO gives military aid, it will bring them closer to war. Others, like Germany, are on board.
It is essential for us to turn the structures that we created on an ad hoc basis back then, for example, education, training and planning, into truly structured, reliable, long-term structures.
The talks will be tough, but NATO is hoping to get this done by July. That's when NATO leaders will meet in Washington. But forget military aid for a moment. After all, it's a very divisive topic. Instead, let's look at NATO's economic warfare. Why has that failed? Because Europe is still buying Russian energy, and a lot of it. Before the war, Europe bought piped gas from Russia. It made up almost 37% of the EU's supply. But after the war, that supply fell from 37% to just 8.7%. And it was good news for Europe. They wanted to reduce reliance on Russian gas. But lately, the trend is changing. More Russian gas is now reaching Europe. Moscow's share has gone up from 8.7% to 15%. How did that happen? Because of LNG, liquefied natural gas. Around 10% of piped gas has been replaced by LNG. And why is no one complaining about this? Because it's a shady trade. You see, Russia exports LNG to many countries, countries like China and Japan. But some of these shipments are rejected. And that's what happened in Argentina. A Russian LNG shipment reached Argentina last year, but the importer rejected it. Argentina rejected it, apparently because of some trouble with payments. So the shipments were rerouted to another country. Guess where? Spain. In fact, Spain is the biggest importer of Russian LNG in Europe. They buy some 5.2 billion cubic meters. Does this not violate sanctions? Well, technically, no, it does not. The EU has only sanctioned Russian oil. You can still buy Russian gas. Plus, most of these purchases are rerouted supplies, which means there is no Russian tag. You see, deliveries only mention the last destination. They do not mention the origin. So that shipment from Argentina would not have a Russian tag. It would have only mentioned Argentina. The gas came from Argentina then. And this is a technicality / hypocrisy. Europe is buying Russian gas through the back door, and they're spending billions of it. $30 billion to be precise, $30 billion of Russian gas, but there is no criticism. That's only safe for countries like India. All the European lectures to India for buying Russian oil when they themselves keep buying Russian gas. Typical European hypocrisy. It also tells you why this war keeps dragging on. Because the West is effectively funding both sides.